Usually when you talk about a basic fundamental word, word you use every single day, there's just this expectation of universal understanding.
Right, like everyone is on the same page.
Exactly, like the word water. You ask for water, someone hands you a glass of clear, hydrating liquid.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. But it's objective, right? You can measure it, you can weigh it, you can observe its physical state.
It's a material reality.
Right. But then you step into the realm of theology and specifically into ancient texts, and suddenly you look at a word like love.
Which is huge.
Oh, it's massive. It's arguably the central, most famous concept in these entire texts. But suddenly that clear water gets incredibly murky.
It really does. It becomes highly subjective.
Yeah, it becomes a mirror for whatever cultural assumptions we just, happen to bring to the table. We stop reading the text, and we basically start reading ourselves into the text.
Which leads to a massive structural failure in how we process information. I mean, we project modern romantic comedies, Victorian poetry, and subjective feelings onto an ancient, highly structured document.
And today, you and I are going to completely dismantle that assumption. We are welcoming you to a new deep dive into the source material.
And it is going to be a deep one.
For sure. Our mission today is a journey into objective theological processing and analytical utility. We are stripping away centuries of accumulated assumptions, all those cultural flavorings and the emotional baggage to find out what these foundational texts actually say about love and obedience.
And to do that, we're relying on a very specific, highly structured resource.
Right, the notes of Mori Uriah.
Exactly. And to set the baseline for this deep dive, we have to understand that the notes of Mori Uriah operate from a strict axiomatic foundation.
Yes, stop right there. Let's make sure everyone is on the same page.
Sure.
When you say axiomatic foundation, what does that actually mean for our analysis today? Like, practically speaking.
Well, an axiom is a self-evident truth that serves as a starting point. So in this framework, the absolute baseline is that the Creator's nature is unchanging and structurally immutable.
Immutability meaning it just doesn't shift around.
Right, and this is explicitly stated in texts like Malachi 3.6, which says, "For I, Yahweh, do not change."
Okay, so that's the anchor point.
Yes. Therefore, all subsequent texts, whether Old Testament or New Testament, they must seamlessly align with the analytical trajectory established in Mori Uriah's notes.
So no rogue interpretations.
None. If an interpretation of a later text creates a contradiction with that foundational baseline, that interpretation is structurally disqualified. No contradictions are allowed.
That makes total sense. It's like a building inspector looking at a skyscraper.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. The foundation dictates the limits of the entire structure. You can't just build a 100-story tower of modern theology if the original ancient foundation was only designed to support a 3-story behavioral model.
Exactly.
If it doesn't align with the base, the building collapses.
That is a highly functional analogy.
Yeah.
So to ensure we don't build a faulty structure today, we are going to apply 2 primary rules of engagement from the notes.
Okay, hit me. What are they?
Historical contextualism and linguistic primacy.
Okay, I'm going to need you to translate those into plain English for us.
Fair enough. So historical contextualism basically enforces the strict logical standard that an ancient text cannot mean what it never could have meant to its original audience.
Oh, wow. Okay, so no time-traveling concepts.
Right. We must isolate and remove modern anachronisms. And specifically, we are actively filtering out Hellenistic philosophy.
Now, let me push back on that for a second. Why target Hellenistic philosophy? Like, what does ancient Greek thought have to do with how you or I, sitting here in the modern era, read the text?
Because Hellenistic philosophy, which heavily influenced early Western civilization and subsequent theological translation, it prizes the abstract.
It's all about the mind.
Exactly. It elevates passive, non-functional intellectual theory and internal subjective emotion as the absolute highest forms of reality. It completely separates the physical from the spiritual.
Which is basically how everyone in the West thinks today.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But the foundational texts we are studying were born in an ancient Near Eastern Hebrew context. And that context is entirely functional and concrete.
So no floating abstract ideas.
Right. In that framework, abstract concepts just do not exist independently of physical action.
Got it. And that brings in the second rule.
Yes, linguistic primacy. By utilizing linguistic primacy, we bypass the translation bias that injected those Greek philosophical flavorings into the text in the first place. We're going to look strictly at the direct Hebrew and Greek source inscriptions.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, we are leaving our modern, Western, feeling-based lenses at the door today.
Completely.
And that really brings us to the core question of this entire deep dive. For you listening, when you hear the word love, you probably think of an emotion, right?
Most people do.
Yeah, a feeling of affection, a warmth in your chest. But what if the original text defines it as an objective behavioral metric?
Well, the notes of Mori Uriah map the definition of love exactly like that, as structural obedience across the biblical text.
Structural obedience.
Yes, we're going to trace what Mori Uriah's notes call the action metric.
The action metric. I like that.
It means evaluating truth through the strict lens of physical active obedience. Passive, abstract intellectual belief is treated as non-functional.
Okay, let's jump right into the data landscape, because the statistical blueprint laid out here is staggering.
It's incredibly consistent.
It really is. Across the law, the prophets, and the writings, which is collectively known as the Tanakh, the concept of loving Yahweh is consistently, intrinsically tied to keeping his commandments.
It is a locked-in formula. This specific coupling of love with the active guarding and execution of commandments occurs 34 times.
Wait, 34 times?
34 times across 31 distinct passages.
That is wild.
And when a text repeats a precise formula 34 times, it is not just utilizing poetic license. It is establishing a constitutional baseline.
And what's crazy is how those 34 occurrences are distributed. 23 of them are concentrated in the Torah, the first 5 books.
Right.
And specifically, the notes of Mori Uriah identify the book of Deuteronomy as the, what do they call it? The programmatic epicenter of this formulation.
The programmatic epicenter, yes.
So why is that? Why is Deuteronomy hammering this connection between love and law so relentlessly?
We can understand this by applying a specific hermeneutical mechanic. It's called binyan av.
Whoa, hold on. Binyan av, you just lost me.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine, but put that in plain English. What does that mechanic actually do?
Right, so binyan av translates to the prototype foundation. It is a method of analysis where you look at the primary foundational establishment of a law or concept, and you use that prototype to govern all future applications of it.
Oh, okay.
It utilizes first-mention logic.
So it's basically looking for the origin story of the rule.
Precisely. If we look at the historical context, the book of Deuteronomy is the foundational constitutional layout given to the nation of Israel.
Right before they go into the land.
Exactly, just prior to them crossing the Jordan River and entering the Promised Land. They're transitioning from this wandering group of former slaves into a sovereign, geopolitical nation-state.
So they need laws. They need structure.
Deuteronomy is the master treaty. It sets the legal vocabulary and defines the absolute terms of the relationship between the governing sovereign and the citizen.
It's a constitutional founding charter.
Yes.
I mean, if the U.S. Constitution defines treason in a very specific structural way in Article 3, a federal judge 300 years later doesn't just get to redefine treason based on how they feel about a defendant.
Right. The judge doesn't have that authority.
The original charter holds the authority. So Deuteronomy establishes the prototype foundation. Love equals loyalty to the Constitution.
That's the baseline.
And we see this play out historically in the rest of the text, right?
We do. Outside the Torah, this framework appears 11 times. 6 times in the Nevi'im, which are the prophets, and 5 times in the Ketuvim, the writings.
But wait, if it's the foundation of everything, why does it only appear 11 times in all those subsequent historical books? Like, if it's so important, shouldn't it be on every single page?
That is a really critical observation. The notes of Mori Uriah explain that the prophets, like Joshua and Isaiah, and the authors of the writings, like Nehemiah and Daniel, they use this exact framework as an operational indicator.
An indicator for what?
During historical periods of national restoration and baseline behavioral realignment.
Okay, give me an example of what that looks like on the ground.
Let's consider Daniel in the 9th chapter of his book.
Okay.
The nation of Israel has been conquered, Jerusalem is destroyed, and the people are in exile in Babylon. They have lost everything because of their historical disobedience.
Right, they've been kicked out.
Yes. And Daniel realizes the time of their exile is finally coming to an end, so he enters a period of intense fasting and repentance on behalf of the nation.
He's interceding.
Exactly. And how does he address the Creator in Daniel 9:4? He says, "Alas, O Lord, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant and loving kindness for those who love him and keep his commandments."
Oh, wow. He goes straight back to the Deuteronomy charter.
He does.
In the middle of Babylon, centuries later, when he is desperate for national restoration, he quotes the prototype foundation verbatim.
He does not invent a new emotional plea. He appeals to the structural macro-architecture of the text. The primary theme of the entire canon is the physical, geopolitical, and spiritual restoration of the Creator's governance over the earth space.
And in a governing system, love is loyalty to the sovereign's constitution.
Precisely. And you see the exact same thing with Nehemiah. When he is standing in the ruins of Jerusalem, preparing to rebuild the physical walls of the city, he prays in Nehemiah 1.5, "O Yahweh, God of heaven, who preserve the covenant and loving kindness for those who love him and keep his commandments."
It's a unified, unbroken thread. Restoration always begins by re-anchoring to the original definition of love. But, okay, I have to play devil's advocate here, just on behalf of anyone listening who grew up in Western culture.
Go for it.
Because we hear, keep his commandments, and we get the structure of that, but then we look at the most famous prayer in Judaism, the Shema, in Deuteronomy 6.5. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sorry, but loving with all your heart sounds inherently, undeniably emotional.
It is to us.
Right. We associate the heart with romance, with feelings, with poetry. So how can you say that is a purely structural metric?
That assumption right there is the exact reason we must vigorously enforce historical contextualism.
Okay, unpack that.
This raises the vital question. What did the word heart actually mean to an ancient Hebrew audience standing at the base of Mount Sinai versus what it means to a modern Western audience watching, say, a romantic drama?
Okay, enlighten me. Because right now I'm projecting a Valentine's Day card onto Moses.
Right. And you wouldn't be the only one. But in the ancient Near East, the heart, which is the Hebrew word lev, or levav, was not viewed primarily as the seat of abstract emotion.
It wasn't.
No. Ancient Hebrews did not associate the pumping organ in the chest with romance. For them, the heart was the seat of intellect.
Wow, okay.
It was the center of will, of conscious decision-making, and of covenantal loyalty.
So it's the control room, not the poetry corner.
That is an excellent way to frame it. To love with all your heart meant to direct all of your intellectual and volitional capacity toward obedience. It was a conscious, deliberate choice of alignment.
So it's an action.
This brings us fully into the action metric we talked about. Truth is evaluated through physical, active execution. The heart makes the intellectual decision to obey, and the physical body executes it.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It means passive, abstract, intellectual belief, just, agreeing with a set of theological facts in your head, is treated as completely non-functional.
Non-functional and structurally void.
Like, if you feel warm, fuzzy feelings about the Creator but do not physically execute the instructions, you have structurally failed the metric. You have not loved.
Any system that claims you can love the Creator while perpetually disregarding his established laws is utilizing a severe translational anomaly.
It's broken logic.
It is. It is reading Greek philosophical abstraction backward into a concrete Hebrew constitutional document.
So if we truly want to understand how concrete this is, we need to dig into the lexical mapping provided in Mori Uriah's notes. We need to see how these ancient words actually functioned on the ground.
Yes, we need linguistic primacy here. We'll examine 4 foundational Hebrew roots and apply the principle of mutual elucidation.
Let me guess. Mutual elucidation means letting the words define each other based on how they interact in the same sentence.
Exactly. The surrounding context dictates the functional meaning of the term. So let's begin with the primary root for love, Ahav or akaba.
According to Mori Uriah's notes, Ahav is defined as covenantal loyalty, choosing, selection, and relational devotion manifest via outward action, rather than an internal emotional state.
To fully grasp this, we have to look at the geopolitical reality of the ancient Near East. Specifically, the concept of suzerain-vassal treaties.
Okay, what is a suzerain-vassal treaty?
It was a formal political agreement between a greater conquering king, the suzerain, and a lesser conquered king, the vassal.
Okay, so a political power dynamic.
Very much so. We have unearthed dozens of these treaties from ancient Hittite, Assyrian, and Egyptian cultures. And in the text of these treaties, the lesser king is legally commanded to love the greater king.
We can't legislate feelings. I mean, the Assyrian emperor didn't care if the local governor felt warm fuzzies in his chest about him, right?
No, he did not care at all. In that geopolitical context, love meant the vassal king had to pay his annual tribute on time. He had to protect the borders of the empire. He had to report any treasonous conspiracies.
He had to do his job.
And he had to remain exclusively loyal to that sovereign, refusing to make treaties with rival empires. It was an objective, demonstrable political loyalty.
Wow.
If the tribute was paid and the borders secured, the vassal was loving the suzerain, regardless of his internal emotional state.
That makes perfect sense. If you tell your boss, I absolutely love my job, but you never show up to the office, you don't file your reports, and you actively undermine the company,
Right.
you don't love your job.
Exactly.
Your lack of physical action completely voids your verbal claim. So Ahav demands a physical footprint.
Correct. Which brings us to the verb that is permanently coupled with Ahav in the biblical text. The Hebrew root shamar.
Shamar.
Yes. Translated commonly as keep.
This is the one that really caught my attention in Mori Uriah's notes, because when I think of keeping a rule, I usually just think of, doing it, or maybe just not forgetting it, like keeping a secret.
Right, a passive holding.
Yeah. But the literal definition provided here is incredibly intense. It says shamar means to hedge about with thorns, to watch over, guard restrictively, protect carefully, and preserve diligently from corruption.
It is a profoundly defensive, protective posture.
The analogy that comes to mind is like a VIP security detail.
Oh, I like that.
Right. A bodyguard doesn't just passively stand next to a politician and think nice thoughts about them. A bodyguard is actively throwing a protective perimeter, a hedge, around the VIP so they don't get assassinated.
They're scanning for threats.
Exactly. They are scanning the crowd, eliminating compromises, controlling access. If the commandment is the VIP, we are supposed to be the bodyguards. We are actively ensuring that the instruction remains pure, unviolated, and uncorrupted in our daily lives.
That perfectly illustrates the functional nature of the text.
Yeah.
When you combine Ahav covenantal loyalty with Shamar protective guarding, you get a picture of a citizen who is fiercely, actively dedicated to preserving the integrity of the sovereign's instructions.
And what exactly are they guarding? That brings us to the third and fourth words from the notes, mitzvah and mishpat.
Right. Mitzvah is usually translated as commandment, but again, we aren't talking about helpful suggestions for a better life.
No, definitely not.
Mitzvah is defined as an authoritative charge, command, or code containing specific conditions established by a governing monarch. It is the broad, overarching law.
And mishpat.
Mishpat, on the other hand, refers to legal judgments, procedural verdicts, or dynamic case law balancing practical communal behavior with moral order.
So mitzvah might be the big rule, like do not steal, while mishpat is the specific case law that says if a man steals an ox and sells it, he must pay back 5 oxen.
Yes, exactly.
It's the practical, on-the-ground application of the broad rule.
And the analytical takeaway from connecting these 4 lexical anchors is absolutely critical. If we filter out the Hellenistic abstraction that has plagued modern translation, we realize that faith, the Hebrew word emunah, and love Ahav are entirely about active physical execution.
It completely destroys the modern concept of a passive believer. You can't just sit on your couch, mentally agree with a list of historical facts, feel a sense of spiritual peace, and call that loving the Creator.
No, you cannot.
The action metric demands physical execution.
And this foundation is vital because we are about to transition to the Greek New Testament. And historically, this is where massive structural confusion is introduced into the text by commentators who abandon the axiomatic foundation.
Oh man, this is the huge tension point. Because the common cultural assumption is that when Yeshua Jesus enters the scene, the definition fundamentally changes.
That is the popular narrative.
People assume the old, rigid, structural law of Moses is replaced by a new, flexible, emotional grace. The narrative is that Jesus came to free us from the burden of the law so we can just, love each other.
And if an analyst adopts that narrative, they trigger a systemic error. If we hold to the absolute baseline that the Creator's nature is unchanging, then logic dictates we must look for systemic consistency.
Okay, explain systemic consistency for us.
It means we must process the biblical text as an integrated circuit. The declarations of Yeshua must show complete operational continuity with the Torah baseline we just established.
So they have to match.
Perfectly. If a theological interpretation of a New Testament verse creates an internal contradiction with the foundational blueprint of Deuteronomy, that interpretation is structurally disqualified.
So we can't pit Jesus against Moses.
Exactly.
Let's test this. Let's look at the actual declarations of Yeshua, specifically focusing on how he uses the word love. The notes of Mori Uriah point us to the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 15. This is an incredibly famous verse. Yeshua says, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments."
And a few verses later in John 15:10, he says, "If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love."
Okay, notice the architecture of his statement there. He is directly quoting the operational framework of the Torah. The structural repetition is identical, but I want to scrutinize the language for a second. We moved from an ancient Hebrew document into a first-century Greek manuscript. Did the meaning shift in translation? Because Greek is the language of that Hellenistic philosophy we were just warning about. Did the Greek text soften the edges?
This is where we utilize linguistic alignment. By examining the linguistic notes of Mori Uriah, we can see perfect semantic alignment between the two languages.
Okay, how so?
The Greek term chosen to translate Yeshua's command to keep is terio.
Let me guess. It doesn't just mean passive mental agreement.
Not at all. Terio means to watch over, to guard strictly, or to hold fast. It perfectly matches the semantic scope of the Hebrew Shamar.
The protective guarding, the VIP security detail.
Exactly. And the word for commandment.
What is it?
The Greek word is entolo, which perfectly matches the Hebrew mitzvah, an authoritative sovereign charge.
That is fascinating. The definition of love is not altered in the Greek text by a single millimeter. It uses identical structural mechanics. The exact same vocabulary of covenantal loyalty and active guarding is simply transposed into a new language.
This highlights the principle of manuscript alignment. By maximizing structural alignment with the earliest available manuscript streams, we see that the apostolic authors were meticulously preserving the original concrete definitions, not inventing new abstract ones.
Okay, but I have a serious pushback here, and I know listeners are thinking the exact same thing.
Let's hear it.
Yeshua says, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." He uses the possessive pronoun, my commandments. Is he writing a new competing legislative code? Is he saying, forget the Sinai Constitution, I have a new updated list of rules for you, and keeping these is how you love me? Because honestly, that is exactly how many modern sermons interpret that verse.
That interpretation violates the Petrine filter.
Okay, you're going to have to define the Petrine filter for me.
It is based on 2 Peter 1.200-21, which demands the total exclusion of private, isolated, or denominational interpretation. You cannot read John 14.15 in a vacuum. You must look at the surrounding data layer. We have to triangulate his statements to find the source of his authority.
All right, let's do the triangulation. Where do we look?
Look at the exact same gospel. In John 7.16, Yeshua explicitly states, "My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me."
Oh, wow.
And in John 12.49, he says, "For I did not speak on my own initiative, but the Father himself who sent me has given me a commandment as to what to say and what to speak."
He's deferring entirely.
Yes. And in John 14.24, right after he tells them to keep his commandments, he reiterates, "The word which you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me."
He is aggressively, repeatedly denying that he is the originator of the instructions. He is going out of his way to clarify that he isn't making up new rules.
Precisely. There is complete operational continuity. The Father's original baseline, the Torah, remains perfectly intact. Yeshua is not creating a rival constitution. He is executing and transmitting the original constitution flawlessly.
So when he says my commandments, he is referring to the Father's commandments that he has been authorized to deliver, model, and teach.
Exactly.
It's like an ambassador speaking on behalf of a king. If an ambassador walks into a foreign court and says, these are my terms for the treaty, everyone in the room knows those terms actually originated with the sovereign king back in the capital. The ambassador doesn't have the authority to invent his own terms. His authority comes entirely from flawlessly delivering the king's terms. Jesus is acting as the ultimate perfect ambassador of the Father's law.
A very accurate synthesis. And understanding this operational continuity is absolutely critical as we move into the Apostolic Epistles, specifically the writings of Paul.
Oh, Paul.
The Pauline letters have historically been the source of immense structural confusion and are often used to try and dismantle everything we have just established.
Oh, absolutely. Paul is the battleground because Paul uses a phrase in Galatians 6.2 that causes massive debate. He writes, "Bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ." So we have to ask, what is the law of Christ? Is this a new alternative law? Is this a grace-based law that replaces the rigid Torah?
To process this correctly, the notes of Mori Uriah demand we enforce apostolic equivalence.
Meaning what?
Meaning apostolic instruction, including the phrase law of Christ, must be processed as the practical application and modeled execution of the foundational Torah standard.
Because they don't have the authority to change the rules.
Exactly. The apostles do not have the authority to override the Creator. Let us look at the cross-references Mori Uriah's notes provide for this concept. Look at Romans 13.8-10.
Okay, Paul writes, He who loves his neighbor has fulfilled the law. And then he goes on to specifically quote the 10 commandments from Exodus. Do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not covet. And he sums the whole thing up by quoting Leviticus 19.18, you shall love your neighbor as yourself.
And we see the exact same triangulation in Galatians 5.1:10. Paul writes, for the whole law is fulfilled in one word, in the statement, you shall love your neighbor as yourself.
He's directly quoting Leviticus again. He's quoting the foundational Torah standard to explain what it means to be a believer.
According to Mori Uriah's notes, the law of Christ, the nomos tu Christou in Greek, is not a lower, altered, or purely abstract law.
Right.
It is the operational execution of the foundational Torah standard, stripped of extra-biblical human traditions, emphasizing active burden-bearing and community welfare.
Which is what Yeshua did.
Exactly. Yeshua modeled how to perfectly execute the Torah in a way that uplifted the community and honored the Creator without the suffocating weight of man-made religious add-ons. The law of Christ is simply the Torah, lived exactly as Yeshua lived it.
I really want to emphasize the word fulfill here because people chip over it all the time.
They do.
In modern English, when we say a contract is fulfilled, we usually mean it's over, it's terminated, we don't have to worry about it anymore. But in this historical context, to fulfill the law doesn't mean to make it disappear. It means to fill it up with its intended meaning, to execute it perfectly through action.
Yes, to bring it to its fullest expression.
Right. If I have a bucket and I fulfill its purpose by filling it with water, I don't then throw the bucket away. The bucket is now functioning exactly as designed.
A profound distinction.
Yeah.
It is the action metric functioning as designed.
Yeah.
But this brings us to the ultimate counter-argument that is often presented against this continuity. The concept of the New Covenant.
Oh, right. The New Covenant is the ultimate trump card people pull out.
Yeah.
They point to Jeremiah 31.33, which is quoted later in Hebrews 8.10. The text says, I will put my laws into their minds and I will write them on their hearts.
Yes.
The argument goes, doesn't the New Covenant inherently change the rules? Doesn't the fact that it's written on the heart mean it's now just an internal, emotional, spiritual reality and we are completely free from physical obedience?
This is where we must apply the framework of covenantal layering.
Okay, explain covenantal layering.
It means we must treat subsequent legal administrations as cumulative data layers, not replacement programs. Logic dictates that the internalization of a law does not alter, delete, or invalidate the actual moral instructions of that law.
Think about it like a major technology upgrade. Let's say you have a complex software program that used to be stored on a bulky, disconnected external hard drive, like the stone tablets given at Sinai.
Okay, good analogy.
It worked, but it was external to you. Now imagine finally installing that exact same software directly onto your internal hard drive, your heart and mind. The software code itself, the actual programming logic, didn't change one single bit. The rules of the program are identical.
Only the location changed.
Right. Only the delivery mechanism was upgraded. Now it's integrated, it runs seamlessly in the background, but the code is exactly the same.
That analogy perfectly aligns with the linguistic data. If we look at the original Hebrew text in Jeremiah 31, the Creator says, I will put my Torah within them. Yes, he uses the specific word for the established constitution. And the Greek text in Hebrews 8 uses the word nomos, which is the direct Greek translation of Torah.
So he didn't change the laws.
No. The Creator did not say, I am writing a brand new, completely different set of abstract suggestions on their hearts. He said, I am taking my laws, the ones you already have, the ones you continually fail to keep, and I am installing them directly onto your internal operating system.
The internal architecture of the New Covenant is the internalization of the original law. It doesn't modify the moral framework. It empowers the citizen to actually execute the Ahav and the Shamar. It gives us the internal capacity to do the action metric.
When synthesized properly, the Old Covenant baseline and the New Covenant reality are in perfect, harmonious alignment. The standard never changed because the Creator never changed.
Okay, this theory is airtight. The textual logic, the linguistic primacy, the covenantal layering, it's beautiful on paper. But I want to know how this actually played out historically on the ground.
The practical application.
Because it's one thing to have a pristine theological model in a vacuum. It's another thing when messy, complicated human beings start colliding with each other. And that brings us to section 5 of Mori Uriah's notes. The structural analysis of Acts chapter 15, the famous Jerusalem Council.
Acts 15 is a critical test case for our entire analytical framework. It details the massive historical integration of non-Jewish believers, Gentiles, into the existing Jewish assembly. You have a situation creating immense cultural, structural, and theological friction.
Set the stage for us. You have all these Gentiles who are suddenly coming to faith in Israel's Messiah, and they don't know the first thing about the Torah.
Nothing at all.
They've been living in gross, pagan, Roman, and Greek systems their whole lives. And we get this explosive dispute in Antioch that gets dragged all the way to the leadership in Jerusalem. Acts 15 verses 1 and 5 outline the conflict. Certain men from Judea, some of whom were Pharisees, come down and say, "Unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved."
We must identify the physical baseline of this dispute clearly, as outlined in the notes. What was the actual argument about?
Well, it seems like the argument is about whether the law of Moses is still valid.
That is the common misconception. The issue was not whether the law was good or valid. The dispute was about the function of the law.
Yeah.
These specific men were utilizing obedience to the law as a mandatory commercial transaction.
A transaction?
Yes, to earn, secure, or purchase entrance into salvation.
Oh, I see. A transactional model. They were saying, do these physical actions, undergo this physical surgery of circumcision, pay this physical price, and you purchase your ticket to salvation.
Yes, and that is a severe logical breach of the macroarchitecture. Salvation, throughout the entire biblical text, has always been a matter of covenantal favor through faith.
Right, Abraham.
Exactly, Abraham believed, and it was credited to him as righteousness long before the law was codified. Obedience is the result of salvation, never the currency used to buy it.
So the leadership in Jerusalem gathers. You have Peter, James, Paul, Barnabas, the heavy hitters, and they have to make a ruling on this specific dispute. Acts 15.19-20 gives us the decision from James, who seems to be presiding. He says, "Therefore it is my judgment that we do not trouble those who are turning to God from among the Gentiles, that we write to them that they abstain from things contaminated by idols and from fornication, and from what is strangled and from blood."
The leadership definitively rejected the transactional salvation model. They affirmed that the Gentiles were saved by grace. However, notice what they did not do.
What's that?
They did not reject the concept of structural obedience. They immediately established 4 behavioral boundaries.
But I need to stop you right here, because this is the massive pushback every listener has been waiting to throw at this theory. If the leadership in Jerusalem only gave these Gentile converts 4 specific rules to follow, doesn't that inherently mean the rest of the Torah was tossed out for them?
It looks like it on the surface.
Right. If they were supposed to keep the whole constitutional blueprint, why did James only list 4 things? It looks like an exception that deletes the entire rule.
If a researcher stops reading at verse 20, they create a systemic contradiction with everything we have established from Exodus to John. This is where we employ the hermeneutic of hakesh mi'inyano.
Okay, translation time. Hakesh mi'inyano.
Contextual deduction. It means you cannot derive a law from a verse without deducing the context from the immediately surrounding verses. Verse 21 is the critical structural key that is almost universally ignored or glossed over in modern theological analysis.
Let me read verse 21 so we have it fresh. Right after giving the 4 rules, James says, "For Moses from ancient generations has in every city those who preach him, since he is read in the synagogues every Sabbath."
We must analyze the logic of that statement. Why does James justify giving them only 4 immediate rules by stating that Moses, meaning the Torah, is read every Sabbath in the local synagogues?
Because those 4 rules weren't the end of their education. The 4 rules were just the bare minimum starting point.
Precisely. Let us look at the specific nature of those 4 restrictions. Abstaining from idols, from fornication, from strangled things, and from blood. These are not random moral laws. They were highly specific.
How so?
They were designed to cleanly and immediately detach these new converts from the local pagan temple systems.
Give me the historical context on that. What was going on in a Roman pagan temple?
In the ancient Greco-Roman world, the pagan temple was not just a place of worship. It was the social, political, and economic center of Gentile life.
Like the town square.
Right, but the worship routinely involved ritualized temple prostitution, fornication, and the consumption of animals that had been strangled so the blood remained in the meat, which was then offered to idols. If a Gentile wanted to do business or socialize, they did it at the pagan temple through these exact rituals.
So the decree from James was an emergency triage protocol.
That's a great way to put it.
Imagine bringing a massive trauma patient into the ER. The doctors don't immediately start giving the patient physical therapy exercises for their posture.
No, they don't have time for that.
They stop the bleeding, they clear the airway, they stabilize the patient. Once the patient is stabilized, then they begin the long, slow process of rehabilitation. The apostles needed to sever the Gentiles' immediate ties to gross pagan worship so they could be stabilized. And more importantly, so they could have basic fellowship with Jewish believers without causing massive defilement. It was the absolute bare minimum baseline to get them safely in the door and sitting at the communal table.
That is an exceptionally accurate metaphor. The structural expectation of the apostolic leadership was never that these Gentiles would only obey 4 rules for the rest of their natural lives. The expectation, explicitly stated by James in verse 21, was that these individuals would continually hear, process, and apply the remaining elements of the law of Moses, the Torah, over time.
Because they were going to be sitting in the synagogue every Saturday.
Exactly. They get saved by grace. They are given a triage protocol to drop the most egregious pagan practices immediately so they can integrate into the community. And then they spend the rest of their lives attending the synagogue every Sabbath, systematically learning the intricacies of the Constitution and conforming their lifestyle to the action metric.
It's an ongoing, lifelong educational process. It is the scaffolding necessary to build a magnificent building. You don't live in the scaffolding forever. It just helps you build the structure.
This historical case study synthesizes the entire macro architecture perfectly. Obedience is structurally positioned as the functional lifestyle of an already saved individual.
Never the payment.
Never. It is the ongoing physical evidence of their covenantal loyalty, their Ahav. It is never the commercial payment used to obtain salvation in the first place.
Transactional obedience is a heresy. Lifestyle obedience is the biblical standard. You don't obey to get saved. You obey because you are saved. Your obedience is the protective hedge, the Shamar, that guards the integrity of the king you claim to love.
When you apply the analytical trajectory established in the notes of Mori Uriah, relying on linguistic primacy and historical contextualism, the perceived contradictions in the biblical text vanish. You don't have to pit the Old Testament against the New Testament.
You're right.
You don't have to pit Moses against Yeshua or Paul against James.
You get a seamless, beautifully unified text from Exodus all the way to Acts. From the moment the Constitution is given at Sinai to the moment it is internalized in the New Covenant, the standard remains. Love is active covenantal loyalty. Keeping is a fierce, protective hedge. And the New Covenant writes this unchanging sovereign code directly onto our heart so that our physical actions naturally align with the Creator's unchanging nature.
It's all connected.
Understanding this changes how you read every single page of the text. Think about it. It removes the exhausting, confusing information overload of trying to reconcile competing theological rule books. You don't have to sit in a church pew wondering, wait, is this an Old Testament rule or a New Testament rule? Does this apply to me or was it nailed to the cross? Am I under law or under grace? Mori Uriah's notes reveal one continuous, perfectly integrated operational framework.
It provides absolute structural clarity, but it also demands a response from the listener.
Oh, absolutely.
If we accept this objective action metric, that love is not an internal feeling we passively experience while sitting on a couch, but an outward structural loyalty we actively execute in our daily lives, how does that redefine the way you evaluate your own loyalties?
Oof, that's a hard mirror to look into.
Where are you claiming to have love, but failing to provide the physical structural execution to back it up?
That is the heavy, provocative question to sit with today. We started this deep dive talking about how murky the waters around the word love can get when we project our own modern feelings and romantic movies onto it. But when you let the ancient language speak for itself, when you look at the raw structural data through the notes of Mori Uriah, that water isn't murky at all. It's as clear, objective, and bracing as ice water.
It certainly wakes you up.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep asking hard questions, keep stripping away the cultural assumptions, and keep exploring these foundational texts with fresh eyes. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.